Greetings, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Dreamscapes. Today we have our friend Lisa Jara from Germany, and she is a soul-based life coach who supports women through life crises. And we're going to throw it back to her in just a moment, but I didn't prepare my stuff. Let's do it off the top of my head. Stop what you're doing, please. Like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. I always need more volunteer dreamers. You can get a t-shirt, a coffee mug on the Spring Store. You can support my work. 12 currently available works of historical dream literature reproductions going back as far as 1500s through the 1900s. Lots of good stuff. I've got books 13 to 14 already in the works, and 5 or 6 more after that. Growing collection. I've rambled for long enough. Thank you for that. Back to our guest, Lisa Jara, and it's of course being with the German pronunciation, it's Jara with a J. So people can find you on Lisa-Jara with a J.com, also on Facebook and Instagram and on YouTube. And I've talked long enough. Why don't you let us know, what is a soul-based life coach? How does that work?
Yeah, thanks. A soul-based life coach. In soul-based coaching, we turn the usual coaching a little bit around in a way that we focus completely on the client's wisdom, that I, as the coach, don't put any kind of interpretation into the coaching space, because that would hinder the flow of the client, and they would not be able to find out how their system works. The whole point of it is that you, as the client, get to know how your system works, almost like looking into a mirror and then finding the little edges or the places where change can happen and where you want change to happen. And this is it's a process that leaves all the responsibility with you as the client. So if you want to take a step forward in your life, a metaphorical step, then I will patiently wait and ask you about the step and how wide it might be and what happens just before the step and what happens after. But I will not tell you, yes, you can do it, you can take the step, because what happens next time, I'm not there. So I will just patiently wait until you take the step or don't. I am kind of open to both and just focused on what it is that you would like to have happen.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So do you have a background in psychology at all, or?
No, I haven't. At the time, I remember when I went to university, I would have liked to study psychology, but in my household, it was psychology, that's only for people who are strange and who want to find out what their problem is. So I kind of did not go that way.
A lot of people are self-motivated to get into psychology. What's wrong with me? That's guilty. When I found out it was autism.
There is nothing wrong with it. That's the thing, I trust a person more when they have worked through their own stuff than people who have studied something but don't have a connection with themselves. So
for sure, it's very common for you're in therapy, your therapist to have a therapist to talk about the struggles he's having with clients and how he's bringing himself to it and what might be complicating that process. So the reason I asked was actually because that is your description of it, this idea of helping people really see themselves, see the situation in total, figure out practical steps to address whatever their goal is without telling them what their goal should be. That is straight out of Psych 101. That's how the therapeutic process is supposed to work. So you've kind of ended up there intuitively or intentionally, either way, but landed on the exact process of how therapy is supposed to work from a psychological perspective. So I would have assumed to hear you say, yes, I have a psych degree, because that's what would happen. So no, not denigrating it that you don't have one, of course.
No. I am very interested in psychology, and I would have loved to study it, and I've read a lot on it, later on. And I want to stress that in soul-based coaching, it's a step further. We bring everything into metaphor, and we invite the client to talk in metaphor. That's why I said it's a metaphorical step they want to take, and we find out where they are when they take that step. And maybe they are, I don't know, on a cliff, and they want to take a step, but the other side is on the other side of the cliff, and they don't know how to overcome this space in between. And then we help them do that in the metaphor realm, because metaphors are the basic language of us humans. It's how we learn when we are very little, and how we perceive the world. I always say it's like the lens that we look at the world through. And so whatever lens we take, it shapes our experience. And so when something changes there, it has like a ripple effect into every area of your life. I love that.
Very much so. I'm of course, being a dream wizard, I'm very heavy on the symbolism. That's what your brain is doing while you're asleep. It's showing you these symbolic images that represent specific ideas and thoughts and feelings and ways you conceive of whole situations. It could distill it down to one image experience, but you explode it out. You pick the pieces apart, and it's this huge bundle of like a dozen different things, and it's all in this iconic, say, imagery that and it changes from culture to culture. That's the most fantastic thing too. It's like where you were raised and the environment and the stories that have been told in that region. Those are the symbols that show up. There's stuff that's common to mankind, and there's stuff that's very specific to regions, and even language, the way people use language. What is it like? The old saying, Eskimos have like 50 words for snow of different kinds. We don't get that much. We get snow here in Oregon, say, but not enough to say that's different between it's fluffy or it's slushy. Those are like our types of snow.
Totally. And, even like there is like when we think of the future, it's usually in front of us. And when we think of the past, it's usually behind us. There is a tribe, I have forgotten where, I think somewhere in the South Americas. And when they talk about the future, that's over there because they don't know the future yet. So they can't see it, and they can't see in the back, obviously.
Yeah, that's a
but
way I've never
they
thought
know
of it.
about the past. So the past is in front of them.
The future is kind of what's approaching them from behind where they can't see. I love that conceptualization. This is a new one on me. I've never thought of it that way before. You cannot see the future, so you must be facing the wrong direction, or not wrong, but in a specific direction to be able to see what has gone before. I wonder how that influences some of their other ideas. Like if that concept, we could probably spend a whole episode just dissecting that.
I know.
But we're about 10 minutes in, and we haven't gotten around to the dream, which I assume is what most people are here for. I don't know, maybe they don't. Do you guys even care about the dreams? Should I just talk to people? I don't know. But this is kind of what I do. So as per my usual process, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to listen to just the dream be told, and then we're going to jump in and try and figure out what it means together. So I'm ready when you are.
Okay. So I usually have a lot of like vivid dreams, which like tell a whole novel kind of. So, but this one was very short and very deep. And it was while I was on my bleed, and that's usually where I have very heavy cramps. So everything is like fuzzy in my head, and I couldn't fall asleep, and I was totally knackered. And then I fell asleep, and then I had this very deep and probably very short dream of where I found myself in the same place I was falling asleep in, like on my sofa. And there was this black cat walking on my left around the sofa, and we don't even have a cat, so and it walked behind, and I was like, oh, no, go away. And it went around the sofa and on the right, and then it transformed into a woman who then looked over the sofa and like put her arms on it and just started talking to me, and then sat down on the sofa to where my feet were, and we were talking. And like from that position, I can see my husband in the other room, and he was working, which he was actually really doing. And in the dream, he came over to have a look at something, and I first thought there was saliva on the woman's feet, who were like hanging a little bit over the sofa. And I associated that with a cat, like a cat's saliva. And then suddenly we realized, no, it was water dripping down from the ceiling or through the ceiling, because the ceiling suddenly had become porous. And there was like water, not only in this room, but like in the whole apartment, coming down through the ceiling. And I stood up and try to scream and shout at my husband that we have to get all our stuff safe and protected. And he wasn't listening. He was having like a meeting, a work meeting, and just walking around, not listening to me. And I remember this visceral feeling of, I tried to scream, but no words came out. And like I could feel my throat clenching almost. And this feeling of, I'm not being heard, I'm not being understood, and I can't express myself. And I was totally concerned about all the stuff in the apartment because it was all getting wet. And then the dream stopped. I woke up.
Okay. That's for, and a lot of people think, oh, the dream wasn't very long. I don't have anything to say, or it can't mean much, or it's not long enough to be interesting. Such a short, really dense experience took a minute and a half to tell, but that's a lot. That's a lot of detail. That's great. Usually it doesn't fill the entire first page of my notes, but just for the phase 2, I call it the deep dive. We're starting on a fresh sheet of chicken scratch paper. So for the second step, we just go begin at the beginning and go through it kind of piece by piece and pick it apart a little bit. It is good. I appreciate you sharing the immediate physical surroundings and bodily experiences that might inform the dream. So that's one of those things where I would say it's good to know. It may or may not be related, but it gives us a reference point. You're dreaming about being on the couch you actually fell asleep on. This is set physically in your home. It very well could have been set somewhere else, and kind of what it is as well as what it isn't makes a difference too. So your first experience of the dream is waking up on the couch. Did you have a coming to consciousness type of feeling, or you were just immediately aware of what was happening?
Yeah, it was more like I hadn't fallen asleep. Like I was lying on the couch and all these thoughts going through my mind, and suddenly this cat comes up.
Okay, so there seems like it could have been a very seamless transition from wakefulness, awareness of your surroundings, into now here the dream starts. You're still where you're at, but
right.
Where did it seem like the cat came from? Any sense of that? Or did you just see motion, you look over and the cat's there suddenly?
No, yeah, it just came to my left. Like to my left there is the little couch table, and the cat was walking between the table and the sofa.
So to help my kind of visual imagination, you've got a couch and you're laying down on it. So if I'm looking at you laying on the couch is facing me. Is your head on the left or right side? Does that make sense?
I was on the left side, actually, even. I was lying on the left side.
So if I'm looking at the couch, from my perspective, looking at you, your head's leaned to my left?
To my left. So
to your left.
Your right.
Gotcha. Maybe we should nail down a visual representation from your perspective. So you're on the couch is facing a direction, and you're laying to the left.
Yes.
Okay. So you...
And to the left there's the table, and on the right side there's like the couch, the back of the couch.
Okay. Gotcha. And so the cat actually approaches from the side your head is on, your left side. Gotcha. I don't know what that means, but that's interesting too. The cat didn't come from, and I mentioned this too, it kind of pinged me with the idea that there was, say, water on the cat's feet. And I'm thinking, feet, which direction are your feet? Where's your head? So it might not mean something different if the cat was coming from, approaching from your foot side, but it appears near your head. So, left side near your head. What do these things mean? I don't know. I get a tickle. I get one of my previous guests would call it a wiggle. She says, follow your wiggle. I get an internal sense of that feels like something. And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but that's when I mention things to people. Hopefully it sets up a little vibration in the background of your mind too. And you're like, why my head and not my feet? Why that particular side of the couch? And your initial, how was the cat moving? Slowly sauntering like a cat moves, or quickly darting motions?
Steadily, neither quick nor very slow.
Okay,
Just
kind
like
of
walking.
medium pace. Yeah, that might mean something else too. If it was, let's say, the visual representation of the cat was hunting. What if it was fearfully creeping? But it was moving at kind of
Leisurely walking.
leisurely. Yeah, like comfortable in the space, like it belonged there, like it wasn't afraid of anything. It wasn't there to cause mischief. Just relax. Just, I'm a cat. I'm here. That kind of presentation of your mind. So it's imagine you were taking a nap and there's a cat and the cat's chill. But your response to it was, shoo cat, get out of here. How do you
Yeah, I don't want cat hair on my sofa.
Do you remember feeling that specifically? Oh no, I'm going to get cat hair on my sofa, so please leave. Don't.
More in this annoying, cat, just leave and don't let your hair fall on my sofa.
Okay. So the initial impression was not, oh, a kitty, come here so I can pet you. It was more of an annoyance, like this is something that's going to complicate my life. This is something that's going to...
Mild annoyance.
Yeah, that oh no, another problem in a sense. If I ever say anything and it's like, that's not exactly how I felt about it, please correct me. Yeah. So a lot of these times I try and dig into my little thesaurus in my head and find, is that the right word? Because there's like 7 words that are close, and you want to kind of pick the right one that really, yeah, that one feels right. And it doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if I said it or it comes from you. So, and so from where your head was and the cat approaching, you said it disappears behind the couch at that point.
Right. Like coming from my left and then walking behind me where I couldn't see it, and then on the right, and I was like, yeah, now go away.
Okay. So the initial observation was just, there's a cat, and it leaves. You didn't actually think or feel anything upon immediately first seeing it. It wasn't until it got to the foot and looked like it might jump up on the couch that you're like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, kind of. So
Okay.
I knew it was behind me and I didn't want it to jump onto the couch. That's correct.
Okay. Did the cat appear to have any response to your emotional projection at that moment? You suddenly feel that annoyance. Oh no. Did the cat seem to respond at all, or did it actually ignore that feeling?
I think once it was like around behind my head and I was kind of shooing it, it just kind of ran, not running in very quick, but it went a little quicker away, and then it transformed into the woman.
So that's kind of interesting. The response of the imagery to your annoyance was it moved faster towards whatever it was there to do. So that's why I pull out those little kind of the order of events, the sequence, and the kind of responses. So your brain. So if we kind of start putting together a little story, your brain says, imagine you're taking a nap and there's a cat there, and you're annoyed with the cat, and the cat responds to the annoyance by moving faster towards what it was going to do anyway. It doesn't get frightened and run away. Your emotional response to it doesn't scare it off. It actually hastens brings the impending event closer faster. There's something in there that's a very interesting
although I'm
imagery.
thinking I think it's more like because it came up and went behind me, and that's when I thought like, oh, I don't want cat hair on my couch.
Yeah.
And I said shoo, and it ran away, kind of.
So it did actually back off a little bit before it came back?
Like it and it might be like 1 or 2 meters that it had a little quicker pace. before it then started to be the woman who looked over the couch at me.
Okay, yeah. So there's something in that sequence of events too. It's like in your mind, it seems like this cat was always the woman, and the woman is the cat. And that transformation, that very obvious, either that, or it was just a cat, but then something about cat or represents or connects to that feminine imagery, ideal, or something in there that your mind draws forth that expression. First, it's an annoying cat. Now it's a woman that has something to say. There's something in there. So
the funny thing is when you say this annoying cat, that woman was annoying as well. Like it was not a good friend or something. Like I think the impression that I got, and I think that's just something from my waking life, was that this woman was the former housekeeper of my parents-in-law. My parents-in-law, my mother-in-law, she had a great uncle who needed tending, and that woman lived with him and cared for him in his house. And for whatever reason, it was that woman, but it can very well be that that day we had talked about her because she's sometimes having some strange thoughts.
Yeah.
But that's like, she's a little bit annoying as well as the cat was.
So if you were to try to describe what you found annoying about her, the way she speaks, the topics she speaks on, maybe her behavior, her attitude, what would you kind of draw from that feeling of annoyance? Where does it come from?
I mean, in that specific dream, I don't even know what she said. Like it was we were talking, but I don't know about what. But yeah, like usually she has some very interesting ways to look at life and to ask my mother-in-law for all kinds of help. That like even now she's not employed anymore. She dares to ask that my mother-in-law pick up her son in another city to get him home or something.
So part of the annoyance is being someone who
doesn't even appreciate that support she gets.
Yeah, asks for it. And the first thing that popped into my head was poor boundaries. It's like she is expecting other people to do things that she probably shouldn't be asking them to do for her. I could see, that I've experienced people like that, and it can be annoyance is a great word for it. It's like, again, they're bothering me with this, that why don't they just take care of it themselves, And it can also be an annoyance if there's a lack of reciprocation, where it's like, they're always asking me for stuff. I ask them for nothing. This is one-sided. That would be very annoying to me. But also you said interesting views of life. When you mention that, so unusual beliefs or conspiracy
I think
theories.
It's more like this way of looking at life and thinking that expecting people to do all kinds of stuff for her, while, as you say, she doesn't really do anything in return.
Yeah, kind of an expectation of unreciprocated effort is what I'm kind of getting out of that. This imbalance. So there's a relationship imbalance with someone who's wanting or needing or demanding more. So it's possible that your brain starts with this iconic imagery of a cat, and really that cat you're annoyed with the cat already. The cat's like, okay, here comes trouble. Here comes another problem I got to deal with, and as soon as your brain says, no, this is an annoyance, get out, it becomes this woman, and she's leaning on the couch and she's engaging you. And then
she's first leaning, and then she's sitting down on the couch where my feet are. And then we are kind of talking, and I suppose I just talked to her because, well, she was there. I couldn't get up because
be rude,
I was
right?
cramped. Yeah, and I was in cramps and all of that. And yeah.
So. Well, slowing it down just a little bit so she leans on the couch. Do you remember any particular expression on her face as she's leaning? That's a very kind of, there's a difference between the leaning and the sitting. Those are in your mind two distinct events, and they mean different things to your mind. What is leaning on the couch? What do you remember feeling when she was attempting to engage you in the first place?
Leave me alone. Like in her facial expression, I could already guess that she wanted something, or like just being heard and somebody that she can talk to without getting replies, like, those
Yeah.
people that can just talk forever.
Oh yeah. I do. And that's interesting too, because some people want physical, tangible behaviors from you. They want you to do something. Some people just want your attention. They want your eyeballs on them. They want you listening. They want that feeling of, and this is generally neutral. We all want to feel seen and heard. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But there are those people who are like, I'm not really here for a conversation. I'm not really here to engage. And again, more iconic imagery of not reciprocating. She wants you to just listen, and you're like, I don't even really care what you're talking about or about you. Why are you bothering me? And fair enough. We're not obligated to be interested in anyone else's stories. Certainly if there's not that reciprocal relationship going on. And it was interesting that then the next step is, and boundaries is coming up in my mind too, like this poor boundaries of this person. And the next step of, they casually leave, they casually walk into the room and I'm just here doing my thing. And you're like annoyed and they back off a little bit, but they come closer and say, hey, let me try again. Really? You want to listen to me, don't you? And you're like, ugh. And then they get closer. They violate another boundary. They're sitting on your feet. They're pushing, getting closer and closer. Demanding this attention. Is this feeling right? Am I mischaracterizing it in any way?
No, that seems about right. I mean, I still talk to her because I like it's also poor boundaries on my side. Like I could just as well say, hey, I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And there may be good reasons not to. There's some of us are very uncomfortable with confrontation. It's just, we don't want to do it. So we'd rather let it be what it is. Sometimes there's complicated dynamics of like, well, if you annoy her, is she going to go and talk to this guy? And that's going to make more trouble for you. Like, do I really want to deal with that? Sometimes there's people who are, they're just troublemakers. And it's like, it's not worth my time to be direct because they're not going to get it. They're going to be upset and they're going to make more trouble. So I'll just shine them on and do whatever and just manage this a different way. And of course, I'm never one to judge anyone for how they deal with stuff like that. It's like, it's complicated. It's all trade-offs, give and take of which is more annoying to you, this behavior or that reaction. So, and again, this may not even be about that woman. Sometimes the fact that we've, your brain may be saying, imagine there's a situation where this type of behavior is present and pressing on you in a way that's annoying and violating boundaries, just like as if it was that woman, but it's not that woman. It's not even actually about her. So I wouldn't want you to lock in and say, this is all a dream about your relationship with this woman, but she represents something to you in that sense. And that's what I'm getting from it. So whether it may be her, maybe it is, but it may not. So I don't want us to get locked in on anything yet. So
yeah, I don't believe it was like her exactly. I mean, I don't even have a real relationship with her. I have met her a couple of times in person, and the rest is more like what I heard from the interactions with my mother-in-law.
For sure, yeah. And then I was trying to think of an analogy. It's almost like we witness an accident, go fender bender. Nobody's life-threatening injuries or anything, but we notice that someone didn't have their blinker on and hit their brakes way too fast. And like, I saw why that happened. Then we go and we have a dream about it later on where we're the one in the car and we don't put our blinker on and we don't hit the brakes. And it's like, it's not even about that accident. It's about that understanding of how a mistake was made and that it was our fault. And that became in that moment iconic of that. And we dream about it later. It's like, this is about your schoolwork and you're not taking it seriously. It's a completely different scenario. It has nothing to do with cars or accidents at all, but it's mistakes being made. That's kind of where I go with these things.
Yeah, and actually that's what I recognized when you reflected back to me like this with that woman or the cat, that like I often have poor boundaries and think just because there's space in my calendar and somebody wants something from me, I have to say yes.
Yeah, and that's a great connection too, that's brought up by this discussion of the dream. So we get to that point where you can go, all of this up to this point, and I have this epiphany of, yeah, boundaries. Man, I need to think about boundaries more. And that could inform the entire rest of the dream, or could be what the whole dream is about. And it may be, if it resonates with you, it's like, yeah, and I don't want us to get locked into you necessarily believing you need to do something different. Sometimes our brain is just like, what does this thing look like? What is it? I'm not judging it in any way. I just want to find out the shape and the color and the size and the mass. And we do these little scientific experiments of just measuring what we're looking at. And sometimes they don't tell us anything about what we want to do about it. We just need to see it for what it is first. Then we can think about it. So that may be what it is. And you don't remember any specific words being spoken. You just remember she's talking to you. And this is, if we wind it back just to the leaning on the edge of the couch, your response to her was, I don't really want to be doing this, annoyance, but you don't remember, if you put yourself back in that moment just slightly, do you remember, was she asking you to do something or just demanding attention? Pay attention to me?
No words at all. I have no idea. I just know that we were in kind of a conversation. So I suppose from my side, it was more of, yeah, well, she's talking to me, so I kind of have to interact with her. But there was no, I don't have a lot of recollection about that. Because like the next thing that happened was really just my husband coming for the water and then the whole apartment being drenched. For sure.
So the response to her approaching it casually was, "Oh, this is, I guess I'll talk to you." And that so your brain may be saying, part of me invited this by not telling her to get lost, because you could have said get lost. So there's that incorporating maybe the boundaries issue. And then that resulted in, she got closer, made herself comfortable, and now she's on the couch with you, and it's like she's really here. She's settled in to engage. And it was round about that moment that you noticed her feet looked slippery.
There was like drops on there, and I thought, oh, the cat's saliva. For whatever reason, I thought that, but
yeah.
And my husband was coming over and looking at it as well.
And that is interesting too. It's like your first thought wasn't your first thought was not that it was water, not that it was oil, not that it was any other kind of clear, shiny substance. It was specifically cat saliva. I don't know what to make of that. Why that particular image? That's unique. That's a very specific thing. When you think about it.
I don't know if that on her feet was actually saliva, but I remember I thought, oh, that could be cat saliva on there. And then like on a closer look, it was, oh no, oh wait, the ceiling.
Yeah. And there's something in there of noticing that.
Interesting.
Assigning a question to it of a specific kind. Is that cat saliva specifically? And then realizing that it was actually something else. So I don't know where to go. I don't know where to go with that. I don't know if cats grooming themselves, cats having wet feet in general means anything to you. That's the only thing I can think of there. Like, why? We might have to come back to it or not understand it at all. But I think there's some kind of a connection there with the water and the freezing and like believing. Maybe it's as easy as this. I'm not even pausing to let you talk. I'm sorry. Maybe it's as simple as misjudging the first observation of something, if that makes sense. Like thinking it's one thing at first glance, but it turns out it's something else. I don't know if anything jumps to mind in that range.
That's what I think. Like, just mistaking something for something else. It was just like, from my waking perspective, interesting that in a dream where there is a woman in front of me, I still remember the cat and making a connection with the cat that isn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. And your brain is very much, that's why I said earlier that the cat is the woman is the cat. They've always been the same. It's a different presentation of the same person, maybe. And you may even think of this person as someone who is kind of stealthy. Maybe they're cat-like in their motions. You don't hear them coming. Suddenly they're just there talking to you, expecting stuff, and out of the blue. Even if you kind of get a glimpse of them coming, there's like, is this really going to be the trouble I think it is, or are they just going to keep walking? I don't know if I want to dwell on the cat saliva specifically. Maybe there was just a connection of cat's groom, or this cat's feet wet because they were cleaning them excessively, or something like that. I don't want to get hung up on it. I'm getting stuck myself in that repertoire. I want to understand it so badly, but it could be as easy as well. Imagine you misperceive, you have a mistaken perception on first sight, and it turns out it's actually something else. And what it turned out to be was water. And it was specifically water dripping from the ceiling. So did you see a drop fall and hit her foot?
No, I just realized, that is not saliva. And we looked at it, and there's water. And then, like, where could it come from? Because there was no water around, no glass of water or anything. So we looked up, and then we saw that the ceiling had become porous. And that's when, like, it all started and everything got drenched.
Yeah, for sure. That's also what if you think of a movie and they want to give you a little tease, a little foreshadowing of something coming. You imagine so there's a dam that's about to break, and what happens first? The dam just doesn't suddenly break. The dam cracks, and you start seeing water leak through. There's something in that process that heightens the tension. It's one thing if you have a jump scare and the dam just breaks open without warning, but when you see it coming and you can't stop it, you're in that moment. That's what really gives the actual breaking of the dam the impact that it does. That little foreshadowing, just a few seconds of, it's coming and I can't avoid it. That was the impression that kind of struck my gut when you were describing that, of the dripping and the seal. Oh no, it's worse than I thought. I'm not just,
yeah.
But it's interesting too that so the water wasn't dripping on you. It wasn't dripping on the floor. You didn't notice a puddle somewhere else. You noticed specifically the feet of the cat are wet from the ice on the ceiling. What? What can you describe what went through your mind? I mean, I'm shocked, surprised, but anything else at that moment making that connection?
More like, what's happening? And then, like, is that true? Am I dreaming? I might even have thought, am I dreaming? Yes. Now that I speak of it, I remember I thought a few times, I must be dreaming, but the dream didn't stop.
That is very interesting too. It's like, and I've talked about this with other folks, that I can't really make sense in my mind, not yet, of lucid dreaming, of people who are like, I'm fully aware that I'm dreaming and I'm going to fly and I'm going to invent worlds. And then you wake up remembering I did all those things on purpose, or at least my half theory is that maybe we're dreaming that we're aware of dreaming, if that makes sense. Like the experience of lucid dreaming may be a dream itself that we're just wake up believing we were in control of for whatever reason. And I don't mean to take anything away from people. It's completely possible people can be semi-conscious in their unconscious dreaming state. That's always that's the theory of most lucid dreamers. So, but then in my skeptical mind, I say I don't know. So it's possible you were.
Well, in that moment, I because I thought I must be dreaming, but because it was so unbelievable. But as I thought that twice and I didn't wake up, I thought, okay, I'm not dreaming; it's happening.
Exactly, and then we get into the multiple layers of that, which is you may have been, as I was originally trying to say with the lucid dreaming thing, is you may have been in a what Mary Arnold Forster said was the borderland state, kind of between dreaming and waking. And some people have kind of interesting dreams where they're floating in and out of consciousness. They're kind of aware of where they're at, but their imagination's running. It's almost like half dreaming, half daydreaming. So that's one possibility, the idea that you were close enough to consciousness that your rational mind could say, am I really seeing what I think I'm seeing? Or the flip side of it is that your brain said, imagine you question reality in a way represented by, am I dreaming? Because we tend to think of dreams as unreal. They don't physically happen in the actual world. So sometimes that iconic representation of dreaming enters your dreams and you ask yourself, am I accurately perceiving reality with the metaphor, am I dreaming? I was going somewhere with all that, I think. But those are the two options that I can think of for that experience. But if we go with the, say, metaphorical side of things, questioning your perception. Sometimes, if we relate it to boundaries, sometimes our boundaries are weak in a way that exists because we question the need for them. We question, am I doing the right thing by putting this here? And if you're uncertain about how strong a boundary should be, it'll be more flexible. It all depending on how firm your resolve is. So questioning your perceptions, questioning the accuracy of your judgment in a way can make boundaries weak. I was going somewhere with that too. I don't know if any of that resonates with you.
It definitely sounds interesting. Like, I'm just asking myself what it felt like, but it was more like the situation that, like, suddenly the ceiling's becoming porous and water dripping through it felt like that's nothing that happens in real life. Yeah. Just like that, without warning.
For sure.
And so that's where the question came from.
And it's a perfectly natural question even to ask.
It was like in that moment, I didn't really think I was dreaming, but it was more like this it's so strange. I must be dreaming.
Is this real?
But I kind of know that I'm not dreaming. Yeah.
So how did the frozen ceiling appear? Was it like as if it had a layer of ice coating the entire ceiling?
Oh, no, porous, not frozen. Like there was like little holes coming into it.
What was the word you used originally?
Porous, isn't that the word? Like
porous. Porous.
Oh, like, sorry. Then it's porous.
That's okay. Good. I'm glad I asked for the so different in pronunciation. That's perfectly fine. So yeah, I was seeing in my mind frozen ice across it. That would be something completely different. But this was more of so it was just plain water, no ice. We can get that out of my head. And
that's correct. And we have a white ceiling. And it was completely solid, as the ceiling is. And then I saw this, like when we saw the water, I saw like one hole where the water had come through. And looking up at the ceiling, suddenly there were like more holes coming, and then the whole ceiling becoming porous.
That is interesting too. So this iconic, I keep getting hair in my face. Wizard hair, I love it, but man, in my eyeballs. Very much like the dam breaking analogy I was going with earlier, which I think is what brought it to my mind. This little foreshadowing of her feet are wet. Where did that water come from? There's a hole in the ceiling and it's dripping. There's more holes in the ceiling. There's a ton of holes in the ceiling. It's coming down like rain. And this kind of slow unfolding of exactly how bad the situation was or how it was quickly escalating. I don't know if that brings anything to mind when you think of it that way, this immediately perceiving a problem that is slowly getting worse and you're watching it happen and it's just happening. I don't know if anything comes to mind.
Definitely the situation with like it happening and you can't stop it. You can't do anything about it. It's just happening. And you're feeling powerless. Like that's part of the reason why I do today what I do and why I've chosen this specific coaching, because I know what it feels like to be powerless or to feel powerless and at the mercy of everything in your life. And I don't want other people to feel that way.
And that's a great motivation for doing beneficial things for people. I would liken it to someone who's lost weight and wants to teach others how to be more fit and healthy, or someone who's kicked a drug addiction and they're like, let me tell you how I did it. Let me tell you how I put this down, put it behind me, something that was destroying my life. So you're coming from that place of, I've been in a bad situation and I've examined it enough that I think I can help other people avoid suffering like I did. That's tremendous motivation.
Yeah, and especially because I believe that like powerlessness is kind of one of the worst feelings you can have in life. And we so often feel powerless, and because life is constantly happening and not all things that happen in life are great. And we always have to make ourselves aware that even if this and this and this and this are unchangeable, I can't do anything about it. Within that, I do have a little bit of leeway to at least choose my response to it, if nothing else, like my inner response. And when we shift into this feeling of, okay, I can't do anything about those things, but this one thing I can do, then we feel in control again somewhat.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely it. It's I think you nailed it when you said, that feeling of being out of control of yourself, your environment, that powerlessness is so. It's like, it's soul. Well, you say you're a soul-based life. It is soul crushing. It steals our hope that we can have any impact on the world around us in a way that's going to make us happier or stronger or better or remove causes of suffering. That's one of the biggest problems I think people have in general, that causes people to react in a lot of different ways that sometimes extend to doing horrible things to other people, to feel a sense of powerfulness in a way that is not good and not helpful. I think there's something very powerful in there. Yeah,
and I mean, I know that's the feeling I have felt, and like it relates to the lack of self-expression. Like in that dream, I couldn't express myself. Nobody would listen to me. It's a similar kind of powerlessness. I can't even express what it is that I'm feeling.
Yeah, for sure. And we haven't even gotten there, but that
I know.
No. But it's great that even at this point, talking about this experience of seeing the ceiling and something is happening that you can't stop, and it's a disaster. It's your apartment's about to be flooded. All your stuff's about to be ruined. Immediately and very logically flows into, well, what's the end of the dream? You're screaming for help and no one's listening. No one's doing anything. I think it's all related. I think we're getting somewhere with that. You said your husband came over at one point. Is when you realized the ceiling was becoming more and more porous, it was leaking water faster, that's when you called him over, or did he come over on his own?
No, he came like the same time I spotted the saliva, or when I still thought it was saliva. I think it was actually he came over from his desk to look at the feet, because he had realized there was something on them, and that made me look at the feet. And then I thought it was saliva, and then like we both looked up and saw that hole in the ceiling.
That is interesting too. So in your mind, you didn't have to ask your husband to take an interest in what was happening to you, what you were experiencing. He came and volunteered it. That, to me, sounds like a very strong representation of a healthy relationship, that you know in your heart, in your dreaming unconscious mind, that if there's a problem you're experiencing, he's probably going to see it. And he's going to be right there with you trying to help. Does that resonate with your personal life? Or I don't mean to get too personal, like relationship stuff is hard, but that's what...
No problem. No, we have an excellent relationship, and like, yes and no to your question, because yes, in that moment he came over. And then when the whole thing with the kind of rain in my apartment happened, he didn't hear me anymore. He was more like drawn into his work meeting that he had, and didn't even pay attention to the rain and to my kind of running around and wanting to scream. Which in real life that wouldn't happen.
For sure. There is some kind of a representation there. So maybe your brain's breaking it down in a little way of, he cares enough to notice, but maybe he doesn't always follow through with helping fix the problem, or staying engaged long enough to and this can be right or wrong. It can be realistic, or it can even be just a worry. You could be imagining, what if he cared enough to notice, but he was helpless? He was helpless to do anything about it. And it is interesting, though. I don't think his own, say, helplessness or inability, I don't think it's suggesting an inability, because he'd actually just shifted focus. He's like, well, I've got other things to do. Good luck with that.
While being drenched.
Yeah. So there's something in there about not... Yeah, but definitely, he cares, but you don't know that doesn't always follow through, maybe in a way that is meaningful to you.
What that made me think about, because I have not said yet that I have OCD, or I live with OCD.
Yeah.
And so I'm already very concerned about dust and everything, and our stuff and clothes and everything being clean. And that's why this rain that would destroy everything
Gotcha.
was especially hard for me to take. And he doesn't have that. So maybe he wasn't as interested in the fact that everything would be destroyed, because he doesn't perceive it that way, that it's that bad.
That's a great connection too. And this is one of those things where it's like, you're not wrong for feeling the way you feel about cleanliness in general. And he's not wrong in lacking that feeling. He just doesn't feel it. And it's not a judgment call to be made there on personal experience, but there's a disconnect in the importance you and he would place on different things. My wife is comfortable with a significantly greater amount of chaos in the physical environment than I am. I need things very orderly and very planned. And she's more like, she'll tell me 5 minutes before she's leaving to go take a bus ride across town for 3 hours. I'm like, you couldn't have told me 3 hours ago so I could just be comfortable with the idea before you leave. I got 5 minutes to accept you're going to be gone. Where are you going? What are you doing? I don't know. And she, we love each other dearly. But there's this disconnect. She's like, I'm going to the store. And she just decided it 5 seconds ago. I'm like, should I go to the store today? Let me write down the pros and cons. What do I need? Let me make a list. I'm not prepared. So I get that. I very much get that. So even free from judgment, in your case, you're looking at a situation where he's aware of it and he cares. He physically brings himself to where you're at to examine something that is important to you, something you feel is important that is happening to you. And then he shifts focus and says, I got other things to do. I can't or won't, for whatever reason, engage with this at this time. Interesting. Very interesting representation.
And what's also interesting, what's coming to me when you reflect all that back, is my OCD, I know, is a lot related to partly suppressing emotions and to feel secure and safe. And I don't dare express myself. So it's also related to the self-expression thing.
Yeah.
Throw that in.
No, for sure. And usually when we start picking this stuff apart a little bit, there's all these little threads that start connecting from one element of the dream to the other. And it's all kind of related to that same thing. That's where I get what I call the story arc of the dream, where it starts to make sense. And then the sequence of events tell that story of what problem you were thinking through or what idea you were trying to conceptualize. And to throw it all the way back to the very beginning, this all started because but the physical circumstances you are experiencing, your menses and cramps. This is physically something you did not ask for. You did not cause it. You are helpless against it. And it's happening to you. And it throws you into this dream where you're thinking about all these, God, I don't like this feeling of helplessness against my own body doing things I don't want it to do. I saw you had a moment there. You lit up. You're like, oh yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I've never thought of it that way, because over time I have made friends with my uterus and my really painful mens. So I'm for the most part okay, and just accepting that this is what it's like right now. It's not normal, it's just common.
Yeah.
Women experience this pain, not every woman though, or not every menstruator. And what I want to share or say is that during our bleeding time, we are very receptive and spiritually attuned. So all this and we don't have a lot of energy in our bodies. So like a lot of stuff can come up that we can look at, that we manage to suppress better at other times.
That's true. And that's a blessing and a curse, so to speak. It's like, hey, all that stuff you don't want to think about that's causing you problems, let's just put that in your face right now and deal with it. And it's like, that's not an opportunity I was looking for, but you can make an opportunity of it.
I love that. Like, I love that every month we have the opportunity to grow, to evolve, to work through the stuff. I love that.
For sure. Yeah. And that's one way to say, take a helpless experience and take control of it. Okay, this is happening. What can I do within it? What can I make from it? What's the analogy of making lemonade out of lemons? That kind of symbolic type of thing. All I got are these sour lemons. Let me get some sugar and some water, and we're gonna have a nice icy cold beverage. I like that type of thing. It's even crappy things that happen to me. I try and say, okay, well, what can I learn from this? What did I do wrong? What situation did I not see coming? Could I have been better prepared? So sometimes even terrible, not terrible is a strong word, but unfortunate, annoying situations I wish I wasn't in. I try and say, well, what can I learn from this? Or what can I do to distract my mind because this is happening? I don't want to wait in this line for 3 hours, but I'm here. I'm doing the thing. I'll sing a song or whatever in my head, make the best of a bad situation. So we got only as far as, so your husband came over when you noticed, you first noticed a problem when we kind of.
No, yeah, well, he noticed the saliva.
Well, so it was actually him that brought your attention to it?
Talking about the dream, yes, I believe it was him bringing the attention to it. Because I was concentrating on the conversation that I was having.
Yeah. And I'd say that's a meaningful distinction, because it could have very well, what I assumed was the other way around, is that you noticed it, which triggered your mind to say his response would be to pay attention because he cares, to come over to investigate. But maybe it was actually he is bringing your attention to something, and then you notice that the source of the problem is, and it's interesting that it's above you and dripping down. There's something to do with that it's coming from the ceiling. When you think of it that way, this idea of something falling upon you, a problem above you, there's something about that iconic ceiling being the source of the leak, the problem, something in there.
Yeah, but what I get right now is more like this feeling of not having any protection, because above there is not much protection. Like I wouldn't even have any where I could look for cover under.
Yeah, and it's not kind of everywhere. The ceiling occupies the entirety of the room. It's above everything in the room, and there's nowhere to. So maybe the kind of feeling of, again, that kind of helpless thing is that no escape. This is happening everywhere around me in this entire space. There's something in there. Maybe it's just the.
Oh yeah, and like because it wasn't just in this room, it was like in all the rooms in this apartment.
So not only were you completely surrounded by the problem in the room, you knew if you went into another room, it was going to be the same problem.
I think in the end, I even got up to move to the other rooms, and I saw like in the bedroom, like the whole bed being drenched. And that was about where the dream stopped then.
Yeah. So you, to nail down a little bit of the sequence right at the very end, because it all ended with you kind of, or didn't end, but the tail end of the dream was this yelling out for help, or feeling you couldn't express yourself. The words.
It was like yelling, but no sound came out.
That's a very.
But I could feel this, like, you know what it feels like when you yell, and I had the feeling, the visceral feeling, but no sound came out.
Like the air was moving, the throat, vocal cords were vibrating, but it was producing no sound.
Yeah, and it was very strained and tight everywhere.
Gotcha. So you were able to force air out, and there should have been sound, but there was nothing.
It's really hard to describe or to
Yeah,
remember
that's why I'm trying to
even.
understand it.
I think like from my throat, I did everything as you would when you scream, but somewhere around here it was blocked. So the air didn't even go out, but like all the muscles and everything was in place for a scream.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think you're giving very much vivid detail of that common experience of I'm in a nightmare. I tried to scream, and no sound came out, and that very visceral, as you say, visceral feeling of I'm doing everything physically possible to force this sound out, to summon, to express myself. I'm in trouble, or to summon help through calling out, and it's blocked, and it wasn't. You weren't being muffled or muzzled. You
No.
weren't. It wasn't like screaming underwater where you're in the wrong environment for it. It's like there's something inside of you that was stopping this cry for help from getting out. It may or may not mean something specific in that sense, but that's what comes to my mind in this context.
Well, yeah, I've had definitely my moments where I tried to get something across and I wasn't heard.
Yeah, and that was my first thought as well too. Is that this, and then my brain goes to how do we parse it out in terms of, are you thinking of this as your inability to ask for help, or you're screaming for help and other people are not hearing? And it may be so because your husband didn't respond to the lack of sound. He couldn't in that sense. What was the sequence of events from discovering he comes over to discover the drip? Oh, I didn't even ask, when did you become aware that he was in the other room? Was that at the beginning of the dream?
The whole time, yeah.
The whole time you knew?
Because I fell asleep. It was the exact situation, just that there was a cat and we don't have a cat.
Right. So the whole time you were aware he's in the other room, and you could see him in the other room?
Have there is just an arc in between the two rooms, so they are not really separate. And I can
and the
just
couch kind of faces. So it was almost like he was in an extended portion of the same room in a way. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. And what did you have a sense of what?
And then he came, and then we saw that it dripped, and then we looked up, and then all these holes started coming and the water dripping. And I think I already started screaming. And that moment was already when he didn't care about that anymore and he was focused on his meeting. And then I got up, walked through the apartment to the bedroom, and then the dream stopped.
Okay. So do you have a sense in the dream of what he was working on in the other room? Did you assume it was anything
just
specific?
Having his work, he's working remotely for his job, so he was just working with his headphones on.
Okay. And he came over, his presence, or he directed your attention to the drip. But then once the problem was identified and you look up and like, oh shit, he was already gone back to his meeting. You said it was a meeting?
Yeah, because he was talking to somebody through his headphones, but he was walking through the room. Me trying to get up and get into the other rooms to check what the situation was like, and he kind of even being in the way because he was just around talking and gesturing.
Interesting. So he's got, not only did his attention turn away from you, he pointed to the problem and then kind of walked away from it. Like, hey, look at, that's a problem. I'm over here doing my own thing. And he's in the way, and he's walking. He's not back at the table. He's not sitting down engaged. Mm-hmm. He is verbally engaged with other people, or at least one other person. And that is part of an obstacle towards you getting to whatever is going to solve whatever.
Oh, you know what that makes me think of?
What happened?
I mean,
tell me.
My mother. I have already done a lot of therapeutic work myself and a lot of coaching and reflection, and I know that a lot of things I feel are because of ways my childhood went and my mother treated me. And this is absolutely not to blame her. I completely understand why she did the things she did. And I believe that she did the best she could. And she loves me. And still, there were a few things that are detrimental or were detrimental to my little child. And like, I know that parts of it is that like she isn't really interested in the things I'm interested in. So she doesn't really care. And if I bring it to her and I'm all excited and it gets like, yeah, fine. What's the weather like where you are?
Oh, yeah, that's sad. It is.
And like the part where you say talking to other people, like when we come to visit, it can happen that in the middle somebody calls and then that call is much more important than us who are only there for a weekend.
Yeah, that's disturbing. Of like, it's like, can you do this another time? Or what are we here for? You know, why turn your tell? Hey, I got family over. I'll call you tomorrow. No, but it made me think. A thought came to my mind when you were saying, not blaming your mother. It's like I've always thought of it as a very important part of growing up is learning to forgive our parents for being only human, as much as we are. They did. Maybe they made mistakes, and fair enough. And but realizing that they're not perfect godly figures that are incapable of doing any wrong, and that it was most often not malicious, not remotely intended to cause any harm. Is what do you know? You don't know any better. Sometimes you do the best you can. You make decisions you think are right, and they don't turn out well. And we have different degrees of accepting that in ourselves. But that growing up process is getting to that point where you're like, yeah, my parents are just people, just like me. I screw up all the time. Of course they did. Yeah. So that's a great sense of peace too. Of like, you don't feel uniquely persecuted. Like, they just fucked up. What are you gonna do?
I just feel like obligated to say this because my mother comes up often when I talk about problems in my life.
Sure.
But it's not to blame her, just because I realized the pattern, and it's probably not just the relationship with her. It has shown up in other situations with other people as well. But that was what I was reminded of when you said like he was talking to somebody else and not like even taking note of the struggle I was going through. And that's what I felt growing up, that like I had nobody to talk to about my struggle.
Yeah, for sure. And then also to very clearly say, this is not necessarily you in your waking life believing your husband doesn't care enough to help you solve problems. That's not it. I wouldn't say remotely it, not based on what you've said about your relationship. It's more your brain saying, imagine your husband cares, but has better things to do. Imagine the person who could help you is as close to you as your husband, but it's showing him as an iconic representation, that idea of someone who cares enough to be interested to draw your attention to a problem, but isn't really involved in fixing it. Like, hey, that's a problem. You better do something about that. I'll be over here. And it's just using that closest person to you to say, what if it was someone as close to you as your husband who cares as much as he does and yet is not involved? And
the part about the ceiling, it feels so vulnerable because like there is no protection from above, and it's coming, and it's like you're being naked, like almost feeling you're naked, and you don't have any protection, and it's coming at you. There's nobody to help you.
Fully exposed to the full consequences of what is about to occur, and that it was everywhere, that it was indoors too. I mean, this very well could have taken place in a completely different environment. Could have been a train station, could have been a park, could have been on top of a mountain, but it's in your home. So from the very beginning of the story arc, it's saying, partly drifting into this dreamy state from physically being there, but your brain didn't change the circumstances. This is happening in your home. This is dealing with people that have poor boundaries and maybe push for more than they should, and that seems to be it's being dripped on, it's being fed by, it's connected to this experience of a much bigger disaster falling on top of you in a way that even the people that care about you most are not taking an interest in or capable of doing anything about. If we kind of put that all together in that kind of a story arc. Does it speak to you in any particular way?
A lot of things in there for
Yeah.
sure.
And I may not have hit it if you
especially
didn't have a moment, or you might need to think
I
about
had
it.
a few but I kind of forget what they were.
I talk too much too sometimes.
Uh,
You
yeah, I
think
could have
about it a
just
moment.
interrupted you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, no, I mean I could have just interrupted you while you were talking, so
Yes,
I
please,
didn't.
anytime.
um, yeah, it feels like definitely this part about the OCD also, that like I have this need to keep all my stuff safe and cleaned and orderly. That was like the task my mother gave me. When you are an adult, you must be responsible for your stuff and keep it in
Yeah.
order. And me not being able to do anything about it, feeling like I failed, feeling like I've been crushed. And that's like, I think that's where something else resonated. Like I've always had this feeling of, how do you call that, impending doom or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Like if I do one misstep, like I will die or something,
Yeah.
or something terrible will happen. And it's kind of that kind of feeling.
That's very much tied in with the OCD thing, because it's very much a control disorder, obsessive compulsive. We obsess over threats and feel compelled to take action because something bad, very bad, is about to happen if I don't exert myself to shape the outcome. And it gets into the disordered range, because we all do that. That's perfectly normal. It's like, yeah, if you're heading towards a cliff at 90 miles an hour, hit the brakes, turn, take control. And then it gets blown out of proportion into micromanaging certain things. And it's a struggle because that feeling is real and it's horrible. And you want to do something about it to make it stop. And sometimes the ritualistic behaviors, it controls it. What they say, all behavior is adaptive, even when it's maladaptive. It's meant to serve a purpose, and it often does. Like if someone who has borderline and does self-harm with cutting, it relieves the physical, visceral, just awful emotional feeling by causing a physical pain that overrides it. It's functional, except for the self-harm part. It serves a purpose.
Yeah, or I read the other day, like cutting, because then you see, oh, I'm alive after all. I don't feel alive, but I can see blood, so I must be alive.
Yeah, for sure. It's a very complicated thing, but it serves a purpose. We just want to
Oh,
meet
yeah.
that need in a way that doesn't open a vein, would be ideal.
Exactly.
And again, it's a
Exactly.
judgment-free thing type of thing. It's like, look, I don't think you're a bad person. I think that's hurting you, and I don't want to see that happen. So maybe we try something else. Hope and with two different degrees of success.
I mean, that's the important part. Like we discussed that in our coaching the other day, like this resistance part, like when we want change, but there is kind of this resistance to it. And a lot of coaches or therapists think that resistance is a bad thing and we have to overcome this resistance, but it's actually telling us something. And unless this role that the resistance is playing isn't fulfilled by something less harmful or like even helpful, we won't let go of it. And it's okay. It belongs to our system. So let's work with it instead of trying to override it.
Yeah. Well, resistance is one of those strange things because it gets cast in a negative context. Oh, you're resisting something that I know is good for you and you should stop fighting me on that. But we recontextualize that into the idea of setting boundaries. A boundary is a resistance. I'm pushing back against your improper desire to force my attention, to force my engagement with something I don't want to be involved in. So we want to put up resistance to certain things that would be bad for us. So there's teasing that apart in the brain. It's like, am I resisting this because I don't want to confront something I did wrong or a way I'm screwing up that would be embarrassing if I were to accept it fully. There are those mental resistances, but there's also like I'm very resistant personally to emotional manipulation. Fortunately, constituted that way biologically with the autism, but That's a good thing. You should have a firm resistance to emotional manipulation, and we wouldn't want to overcome that at all. That's where my brain went with all that. I don't know that I had a point, but just that word resistance popped into my head when you mentioned it and the context of it.
Yeah, I just find it really interesting that we have so many words or concepts that we immediately put into a negative draw, so to speak. Like even in coaching, when it's dark and it's black, and I go like, and what kind of dark? But most people would think, oh, it's dark and black, that's not good. And I'm like, could just as well be the darkness of the womb, like something positive and nourishing. So I have to find out what it is for the client.
Very much so. Yeah. And that's why we've dug into like all of these individual little, so if we were to, I don't know that there's more. So you said maybe it ends in the bedroom. There might be something interesting there of where do you go to see if it's also being damaged, and it ends up being the bedroom, the place you sleep, the place you are intimate, perhaps, a place where there's hardly being more vulnerable than unconscious in bed. Go ahead.
I remember that there, and that's something I am currently working on, that when I was somewhere in my teens, that the bed was the only place where I felt safe. So since then it has been my safe space. And even that is violated now with this water.
By the water. Yeah, for sure. And you're thinking about all your stuff and how this, and people's physical possessions, it can mean a lot of things. It can be materialism and you're overly obsessed with stuff. It's also, I mean, you need a couch and you need a bed. These are things you use to sit on, and it's things that are expensive to replace. So being concerned with your things being ruined by this experience is not necessarily a bad thing or indicate anything other than you've got stuff, whatever that stuff is that's important to you and it's under threat.
And that's even more interesting that my husband didn't react, because he has lots of technical stuff and his computer and a drone and all of that, and it's all lying here openly.
Yeah. So whatever your brain is conceptualizing as a threat, it's not seen the same way by even the people who are closest to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense with the OCD thing. I mean, we've gotten to a lot of great territory with this, and we don't even need an answer in terms of what should you do? What is the dream telling you want? It's definitely telling you these are things that are on your mind. These are things that are open questions for you that you're still trying to turn at a different angle and get a better look at. Your tendency towards the OCD, your boundaries with pushy people like that woman, the ability to connect with your husband on the level of, this is important to me. Can you see it the way I do? And problems, and on top of all that, managing problems big enough to just destroy your life in this iconic deluge from heaven type of way. All of these things are kind of going through your mind during that. How long did you sleep? Would you say?
Can only have been a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Or even less, really, it could have been just a few seconds. I just know that I was deeply, deeply asleep. It was really I woke with this feeling of still crying out.
Yeah.
And not being able to, and it felt like I had been really deep.
For sure. And you can slip under real quick and go right into the dream cycle. And when people talk about the speed of thought, that all of these ideas can flash through your mind so fast, a whole story. There's people who were asleep moments. There's an iconic story as well. Let's say iconic, but a famous story of a man in the court of a king in what do they call him? Not a shah, but like a Middle Eastern Ottoman Empire type of king. He dunked his head in the water briefly, and in the space between dunking his head and pulling it out, he lived like a dozen lifetimes. And it was all this, I mean, of course, a fairy story in that sense of is that possible? But it's very iconic of how we dream. It's people have dreams that feel like they last a year. They go through a year of their life in 30 minutes. That kind of a thing. So not at all surprising. I'm rambling again, but
but it's fascinating. I mean, dreams and all of that and what they can tell us. It's fascinating. And even now that you repeated all of these parts and that they just bring up maybe things that I can have another look at if I fancy.
Yeah, certainly. At least
and like I was thinking, like feeling in, and of course I'm easily into metaphor because of my work and everything, but like imagining myself if that would happen, well, yeah, I can't do anything about it. So I just stand here firm.
For sure.
Like thinking of it right now, it feels more like, hey, yeah, storm, come on, you won't get me.
Yeah, definitely. Or whatever it is, I'll deal with it. I can do this. Yeah, that's a very good feeling. And it doesn't mean that those are the most... Sometimes people have a dream and it feels very impactful because the things they're dreaming about are important. It may not be urgent. It may not be like, other things in your life may be completely fine and going along steady enough. Your brain's just coming back to these things to revisit it, to say, have I thought about this enough? Am I sure my approach to solving that problem is right? And the answer may be yes, you're doing everything you can. But our brain goes back to those things sometimes and says, maybe I should look at that again. Is that still a problem? Did I handle that properly? It kind of sounds like one of these situations like you've known for a while that a lot of these different issues are discreetly important to you in some way. So to get them all together in the dream, and I would...
Yeah, especially like the part with the self-expression, because I haven't been in business that long yet. So I don't have like a huge following or community, and I know that part of it is because I have all these ideas. I have so many things I want to say.
Oh yeah.
And I don't say them. I feel tongue-tied.
Yeah.
Like I want to record something, I press record, and then I'm like, okay, where do I start? What do I say? Are people even interested in what I have to say? Another thing from like my mother.
Exactly. Sometimes, I mean, if I were to give advice, and I try not to do it, but I would say, you know how they say sometimes write a letter to an abusive father and tell him exactly what you think, and don't send the letter. This is for you. This is you to get it out of your mind on paper. Well, you can take that same way out of in a different context, and you've got things to say. Start the recording and ramble, and then don't show anybody if you don't want to, or you can edit it later and no one will ever know, and it sounds a little more coherent. I think I saw an episode with was the Russell Brand podcast recently. He had like a 15-20 minute clip, and it was edited. He must have rambled for 2 hours and cut out all the nonsense and just cut to the chase. So even the people with like 5 million followers, they're doing exactly that. No advice, you do what you want, but I would say just learn through experience. Just do it, see what happens.
Yeah, I definitely need to get the words out there.
Yeah. Well, if you feel like we came to at least a satisfactory understanding of the symbolism and how it kind of relates to your life, I feel good about it. But it's always up to the dreamer. You got more questions? I'll keep talking. Whatever you want to do.
No, it's really cool to have dove into all of these different parts a little bit more than I would if I looked at it just myself. And I'm just over and over again fascinated with how our systems work and how we make sense of things, and like how all these play out in our dreams. And yeah, so thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's been great to have you. I always find these dreams, all dreams, fascinating. They're always connected to something. The symbology is always there. Like, oh, that's where that came from. And then
you know what? Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I'll go in a moment.
Please.
I read like that in some Native American traditions, like they had the moon lodge where women would go, or menstruators would go during their bleed, and then they would like at night sleep all with their heads to the center, and the next morning they had to go to, I don't know if it was the shaman or someone in there, or the chief, and they had to report their dreams. And like from one single dream, it may have been very confusing, but looking at the dreams of all the menstruators together, they gathered information on like where to move next and make camp next. So
nice.
Yes.
There is I've been reading through all this historical dream literature, plug for my shameless self-promotion. There are many stories of these say indigenous or native traditions of how the shaman, the chief, the wise men, all dealt with dreams and how they used that to inform decisions and understand themselves. We've been trying to understand our dreams for probably tens of thousands of years.
I always love this interplay of the feminine and masculine energies. Like even when I draw an oracle card, it comes through my intuition that I pick a card, but then I can use my logical brain to make sense of it in the moment, in my situation. And like a dream is very similar. So it comes through intuition, and then you use your logical brain to make sense of it.
Definitely. And as much as I lean into the whole wizard thing, I got the hair and I love the iconography of it. And it means something specific to me, but still, it's amazing that something so natural, physical, psychological is magical. It's both at the same time for me. So that's why I love that. Well, why don't we do this? We'll go back through my notes real quick here so I can get this right. This has been our friend Lisa Jara, Jara with a J, Jara, and you can find her at lisa-jara.com. She is a soul-based life coach who supports women through life crises based on her own experience and tremendous insights, and using, in my opinion, foundational principles of psychology that she arrived at intuitively and through her own teaching. And I think that's fantastic. So hopefully you guys will, look her up, and all of these links will be in the description below. And I'm just going to say, hey, if you haven't done it already, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteer dreamers. Buy a book or a coffee mug or whatnot. Links in the description as well. 12 currently books of historical dream literature available. And I'll just say one more time, Lisa, thanks for being here. I appreciate talking to you.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful experience.
Very good. Thank you. And I'll say to everybody out there, hey, thanks for listening.